What's up, guys? Shane Larson here. Welcome out to the podcast. Today, we're talking about NIL, name, image, and likeness, with the executive director of the RAM Collective at Colorado State University. His name is Todd Eakes, and it was a connection I made through Bob Smith over at Nation's Best Football. So shout out to Nation's Best for sponsoring this podcast and making the connection with Todd. This is a very insightful interview. We're talking about NIL. We'll cover a couple of things, the history of NIL, and dating even back to the days before it was legalized, what they're seeing now in the House case that's going on, and how they think that will affect the future of NIL as well. Very interesting conversation. It is continuing to evolve, and we're still not seeing the end of that evolution. So Todd is going to give his insight to what he's seen being a part of it now, being a former player himself, and what he expects to see moving forward. You'll also talk about how the RAM Collective, how you can become a part of it and contribute back to the athletes at Colorado State University. That's a really insightful interview. Super stoked to bring this one to you guys today. So get ready and get your notepads out, because this is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's going on, everyone? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. My name is Shane Larson, host of the show. Listen, we are in December, and we are finishing up year 8 of the podcast. Started this in 2017, January of 2017, and we are completing another year of the podcast. And I just want to say thank you to all those who have tuned in. As you guys heard in the introduction, we got another special episode here coming your way, but I want to make sure that everybody understands how appreciative I am of the support from the beginning. You know, I started this show back in my kitchen in 2017, just trying to figure out what I was going to be doing with it. It has grown into something much more than that. And over the last 8 years, I've been able to interview so many amazing people. The show has been downloaded in 182 countries, all 50 states. It's grown organically, thanks in large part to everybody who's taken part. So if you're watching this for the first time, or you're listening to it for the first time, I just ask that you consider hitting the subscribe button on whichever platform that you're listening on. I'm trying to build out YouTube. It's my smallest platform. But if you guys could help me get to, building that platform out, I'm almost to 600 subscribers there, but my audio platform has all my listeners. So I appreciate everybody there. If you're listening to it, hit the subscribe button and we'll get rolling. So as y'all heard in the introduction, we have a special guest on the show. His name is Todd Eakes. He is the executive director for the RAM Collective, which is the collective for NIL over at Colorado State University. And I'm really excited to talk to Todd. Just about, 2.5, 3 months ago, I had another guest, Annie Brady from Colorado State, on the podcast. So it was just kind of a cool connection to, kind of keep in contact with someone else from the university, but super excited to talk all things NIL, as well as the RAM Collective. So Todd, thanks for joining the show, man.
Yeah, absolutely, Shane. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
For sure. So if we rewind the clock a little bit, Todd, if we go back in time, I was talking to Lee Steinberg, he's a sports agent. And when Lee was talking about NIL, it was at the beginning of the NIL stage. And I remember having this convo with him. He was talking about how it was the wild, wild west right now. Like right when it kind of was just like, here we go. It was a free for all. Not a lot of regulation anywhere. That was for the athletes and for everybody else. There were a lot of people trying to jump in and take advantage of the market at that time. I feel like, from my perspective, since that day that I spoke to Lee Steinberg till now, things have kind of mellowed out a little bit, but things have shifted in the NIL market. I want to get your perspective, though, Todd. Where do you feel like NIL, so for those listening, name, image, and likeness, the whole NIL market, where is it today as compared to when it first kind of launched about 3 years ago?
Yeah, that's a big topic, and Lee's a great reference. I had actually a chance to work with Lee coming out of college in the 80s and ended up going with a different agent trying to advance my pro career, but certainly coming out of that era, just on the tail end of the 70s where, guys were getting cars under the table and all those different things. And now, a guy will get a car and it'll be all over social media. So it went from kind of a hush deal to everybody gets a car now. I think the University of Utah or something like that had cars out to all of their football players. So certainly since I'm a little later to the game here in NIL, I didn't jump in right away. 3 years ago, I kind of was sitting on the sidelines and kind of scratching my head and trying to figure out exactly what was going on. Again, from my background as a player in the mid '80s at Colorado State University as an offensive line, everything in the NCAA world was pretty locked down. We weren't even able to have a part-time job to help support the income and expenses that we had outside of what our scholarships paid for. So looking at it, I really wasn't sure that it made a lot of sense, but at the same time, it looked like it was the wave of the future. And I think when you look at a guy like Johnny Manziel and how exploited he was, I think that's really where the NCAA used. I think that's where the armor first started to crack. And I think it's just been, we've seen a manifestation of that, ever since that led to the NIL opening up in 2 or 3 years ago, as you mentioned, to where it is today. So, from a certain standpoint, it's maybe not quite as much the wild, wild west right now, but I do think that it's kind of the calm before the storm. And that is in relationship to the House case versus the NCAA versus the House case. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but that case really is where all eyes in NIL are pointed toward now, and people are kind of tiptoeing around that a little bit. And everybody has an opinion on how that House case is going to go, and then what that impact is going to be. And I think you see schools like Colorado State and all the schools across the country now trying to align themselves with the pending outcome of that House case.
Interesting. Okay. So no, that's actually some good insight. And I wanted to kind of circle back to the House case here in just a second too. But Todd, if we rewind the clock when you were, you're a player yourself, you're coming in as an athlete, I wanted to, I know that things were happening, people getting paid under the table. It was kind of hush hush back then. But if you could go back in time, just as a former athlete yourself, do you feel like, just growing up before this was all actually legal, did you feel like the athletes should have been able to monetize off of their name, image, and likeness? Were you one of those athletes that was like, yeah, dude, we should have been able to do that without even a question kind of thing?
Honestly, I really didn't. I was, not highly recruited. I was grateful and felt that the full ride scholarship that I was offered to go to Colorado State was well worth the investment and a good trade-off for the amount of work and time and effort that went into to playing football at the Division I level. I think that was kind of in my mind, that was a pretty fair trade in terms of the compensation for the work put forth.
That's fair. I always thought that was interesting because even the beginning stages of this podcast, 2017, we had a conversation of whether or not athletes should get paid for what they're doing and just the repercussions that could come from it. And here was a question too, and just from your perspective, I guess, being around the sports world, but now in the NIL space, there was a 30 for 30 documentary years back. It was called Broke. And it was talking about how athletes go broke. And one of the things that stood out to me, Todd, was Cam Newton, I think was quoted talking about how he didn't even know how to cash a check. So when he got his signing bonus, when he went into the NFL, he didn't even know how to cash a check. And he didn't understand how this and that worked and whatever. Right. And I started realizing all these athletes were so unaware, because when they were on full ride scholarships, a lot of those full ride scholarships, part of the whole agreement was you couldn't earn additional revenue because that's part of your agreement. So they weren't even allowed to really work and make additional income in some of those cases. And so they didn't know what to do with money. So we were talking about athletes just not having financial literacy at all, period. And then when they try to go to the next level, or even just get into a real job when they get done with school, if they don't go professional, they don't even know how to handle the money that they're getting. They don't know how taxes work. So anyway, flash forward to the NIL stuff. I'm just curious if you've seen any of these concerns coming out with athletes not understanding how taxes work, because I know that was a discussion. If they're going to start paying these athletes and sponsoring them, how does it work for taxes? Are you noticing that yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a heightened awareness of that. We actually have a couple of guys that are part of our collective that are in financial planning and are addressing those same concerns with the athletes at Colorado State. We have a guy that, is set aside, funding for those athletes that have children now. We have another guy that's, said, hey, if you can't manage, $5, how are you going to manage, $5 million in an NIL? So there are a lot of resources that are being brought to bear to address that topic. That's very insightful. And, I think that is, I think that's right on.
Now, another concern that I've seen too, Todd, was like I said at the very beginning of the show, one of the concerns when NIL was just like officially was ready to go, I felt like, at least from my perspective in the media, a lot of people were trying to take advantage of the market. It was a new market, a new opportunity. So a lot of businesses were popping up with like, they're now this NIL expert consultant. And so they were going to start consulting with these athletes and teaching them how to do this, that, and the third. And when I would like question them and get a little bit deeper into their business model, they didn't really have the answers to much because there wasn't anything to go off of. They had no information. So when I would ask them deeper questions, it just felt like to me that they were like charging, in my opinion, asinine fees for a lot of, basic level information. Do you see this still being something that's happening, or do you feel like the people that are coming in here as quote unquote consultants are actually becoming more and more educated and they're actually providing more and the other stuff is filtering out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I certainly think, with as much money as being thrown around right now in NIL, especially within what I describe as the top 5% of the talent pool, the Shadurs of the world that are, driving these insane dollars from, in a lot of cases, perfectly legitimate sponsors. There's just going to be, blood in the water that, any business-minded person is going to say, hey, let's see if we can take advantage of that. Maybe we have a background in, digital marketing or digital agency. That's where I've seen a lot of the quote unquote NIL consultants have kind of come out of an expertise in branding or some other area, and they just are now trying to, apply that to the NIL space. I mean, you look at even a giant company like Two Circles that, on a global basis didn't have anything to do with college sports, but now has got a lot of dedicated resources to just trying to build out and service that NIL industry. So, I think like anything else, there's going to be, bad apples and good apples. For the most part, though, I think that most of the consultants and the people in the industry are trying to serve the kids and trying to, help their programs improve and not just out to make a buck.
Oh, that's good to know, man. That's awesome. So you're a Colorado State alum, right? You graduated from Colorado State, and you're back there as the director, with the NIL stuff with the Ram Collective, and you're helping out on that space. Now let's talk about the Ram Collective specifically, and how it's benefited. So how is it set up specifically for the athletes at Colorado State? How do you guys break it out for the collective?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of important things to point out when it relates to our collective and our relationship with Colorado State University. First of all, the Ram Collective is not officially recognized by Colorado State University at this point in time, and for the most part, I think that's a good thing. I spoke to John Weber and his associate Scott Sidwell back in July before we launched this thing and kind of laid out kind of where we were trying to go, and I think John and Scott were appreciative of the fact that part of the reason that we started the Ram Collective was the challenges in terms of connecting former players and alumni of CSU sports across all sports, male and female. We'd had a former athletes association, alumni association in the past that, for whatever reason went away. And, I thought this was a good opportunity to kind of reboot that, reconnect with former players, and then fold in relationships with current players so we could provide them with mentoring opportunities. And, like I said before, there are a couple of guys that have experience in the financial services sector and saying, hey, how can we come alongside of the players today and help them? So I think that was a twofold approach in terms of, hey, we're athletes. We know what it's like to go through a sport. And, right now there's a lot of disparity, at least at Colorado State, between, in terms of, there's only so much money to go around. And I think that's probably true, across a lot of different NILs and a lot of different universities. So I think that I saw an opportunity where we could kind of reboot the former athletes together, fold in opportunities to mentor current players, and then help them opportunistically in the NIL space. And so as a result of not being officially affiliated with Colorado State University, I'm able to do a few things that their official collective called the Green and Gold Guard is not able to do in terms of donor direct contributions. And that's a huge area right now, which is creating a lot of disparity between companies and brands that want athletes to put their, their name, image, and likeness on a brand, and just really what amounts to pay for play. And there's a huge disparity in terms of those dollars, and sorting that out and tying it all back to the house case, it's complicated. So I think that, for us, for the Ram Collective, I think that we have identified this specific niche to, bridge the gap, between former players and current players, and fold in the NIL component as well.
No, I think that's really cool. Bringing in the former players, it's a unique spin on it. I like that a lot. You did mention just like the disparity there with like brands paying out big deals to the players. Can you maybe touch base on that a little bit more if we were to unpack that? How that works with a collective. So how do you guys play a role in that? Because normally in those situations, a player would be getting paid directly from the brand, right? Instead of out of a collective's, disbursement of funds. So how do you guys, I guess, maybe if you could dig a little deeper into that one to help me understand a little bit better how you guys play a role in that again?
As far as the true NIL deals, brokering brands with athletes, I get approached almost on a daily basis with different brands that want to connect with CSU athletes. I've been able to, build relationships with athletes across all the sports at CSU in a few months that I've, been doing this. And there are some, higher profile athletes that all brands kind of want a part of. It hasn't been a giant focus for us, because you're right that a lot of the at least localized brands are those type of brand and NIL deals are being brokered either by third parties, like a Learfield properties that have traditionally supported the sponsorships and the dollar revenue, the ad revenues that it generate through Colorado State University and others. And those deals have been primarily brokered, like you said, between the sponsor and the athlete directly. However, I think the disparity, especially on the localized level, a lot of small, medium-sized businesses that are specific to any given market, have a tendency to be potentially priced out of NIL because of the thousands, if not, tens of thousands of dollars that are coming in through the direct donor contributions, either through the nonprofit arm, which is a whole nother thing that's changed a lot, I think, over the last 3 years, how most collectives started as nonprofits, and now the IRS is kind of scrutinizing that a little bit more. And ultimately, I think the house case is going to bail a lot of those organizations out in that regard. But yeah, when it comes to the actual, local brands, like, hey, Colorado State's in Fort Collins, Colorado, and there's, a pizza shop down the road, or a guy that has an indoor golf, business, and, how are they going to generate and build those relationships with those players? And, as far as I'm concerned, is, those deals that happen directly between the brands and the players are great. We just try to see what we can do to help with that if it makes sense, curate the experience, and also go out to direct donors to help facilitate, direct donor contributions and connection with current athletes.
Sure. Okay. No, that's cool to know. I was looking at your guys' frequently asked questions on your guys' website for the Ram Collective, and one of the questions was regarding if you're not a former player, can you be part of the Ram Collective? And it said yes. I would just ask, like, what would be the incentive to be part of the Ram Collective as compared to the Green and Gold? Remind me, the GGG that you just mentioned. Oh goodness, what does it say on that one? GGG. What was it called? Oh, the Green and Gold Guard. Green Gold Guard. Yeah. As compared to that collective, why would somebody want to be part of the Ram Collective if they're not a former player as compared to the GGG?
Yeah, the biggest advantage is the ability to direct funding directly to either a player or a group of players. We just launched the first of its kind It's a crowdfunding concept that we call the O Legacy Fund, where I've asked former offensive linemen, guys that I've played with, guys that I haven't played with, to say, hey, look, let's give back. Let's financially give back to the current players. The CSU offensive line have been a big part of the success our team has enjoyed this year. And we have the opportunity to go directly through to those players through contracts that will that are compliant, that will pass the compliancy test that's required of all the athletes, and allow them to benefit directly from the former athletes as well. And for that matter, anybody could donate to that. Anybody could say, like you said, to the FAQ. Right now it's designed for, hey, former offensive linemen donate money to the current players. But if there's, a friend or, somebody, or you just want to support the offensive lineman at CSU, if you're a fan, you might be a mom, a dad, an uncle, cousin, whatever, as far as that goes, there's no restriction in terms of how and who can support what programs. And I think the biggest differentiator, again, for us is just the ability to direct those contributions directly to players or players groups, as opposed to running them through either nonprofits or community-based groups, which are, have been the primary restriction for any of the collectives out there that are, 501c3s.
Okay. See, this is the insight that the general population, I know for a fact, doesn't have. Like, they don't know this stuff. And so I'm really grateful for your insight here. So, Todd, here, I'm a Boise State alum. I'm a weird guy. I'm a Boise State alum, love Boise State, born and raised here. This is where I live, is Boise, Idaho. But I'm also an Ohio State Buckeyes fanatic. Been a Buckeyes fan since I was in second grade. So I was a huge Eddie George fan back in the day. So anyway, I'm in a weird situation. They call me the Boise Buckeye because it's just interesting take. But I will say I've got a lot of good connections over there. Jeremiah Dickey is the athletic director at Boise State University. I had him on the podcast. I conversed with him quite a bit, and I love Jeremiah. And I asked his opinion, and I wanted to kind of get your insight too, from an athletic director's perspective on how NIL works. And he always appreciates the communication amongst the collectives and the people doing the thing. He understands it's kind of a tricky situation though, because like you were saying with the Ram collective, it's not recognized by Colorado State. So do you have any pushback, I should say, from the athletic director at Colorado State and the leadership in athletics over at the university in regards to how you guys disperse any type of funds? Are you constantly in communication with them? Because I know that's a talking point just from my conversations with Jeremiah.
Yeah, I think that, the communication, could be better. I've had a couple of meetings. Again, I had mentioned the meeting I had back this summer. I sat down with Scott a few weeks ago, and, we kind of talked about what the relationship would look like between Colorado State and the Green and Gold Guard and the Ram Collective, at least in the short term. So I definitely think that, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want our programs to be successful. We all want to be able to attract and retain the top talent and build out, the brand and the product and the teams at Colorado State University. I do think a lot of what you're going to see, and I think it'll certainly be true at Colorado State as well. I mean, time will tell, but, we've talked about the House settlement case a couple of times, but the likely outcome of the House settlement case is that a lot of the collectives out there are probably going to just be absorbed by the university themselves. So the administrator, the athletic administrator, and working closely with the officially recognized collectives within these universities are just going to get absorbed. I do believe that that's what will happen at Colorado State. UCF just came out with an article last week. UCF announced that, pending House settlement, and if it goes the way everybody thinks it's going to go, or that it's planned to go, that UCF is just going to absorb its collective into the university. So I think a lot of that is what's going to happen. I think that the Ram collective, we may not want to call ourselves a collective at that point in time, but I think at the end of the day, we have staying power in that, at our core, we're former athletes. So, coaches will come and go, administrators come and go, athletic directors come and go. In the 30, 35 years I've been out of CSU, I've seen, a handful of athletic directors and a handful of coaches, certainly in football and across all the other programs. So at the end of the day, I joke around with all the guys that are part of our collective, all the former athletes and former members. It's not like we can say, hey, we had a bad game or our team lost, so let's all go get in the transfer portal and say, hey, we're going to be alums of Boise State instead of Colorado State, right? So, I think that, at the end of the day, the athletes that, that put in the work and bled, sweat, and cried for their teams are going to be the ones, just like yourself, how you're loyal to Boise State, having gone there, and then your affinity to Ohio State. So I think that those types of things are what establish staying power. So again, for me, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want our programs to be successful. I think that sure, the communications could be better, but we're just getting started. But our message is, we're not going to go away anytime soon. We may have a different flavor, and as the NIL landscape evolves, I think we'll adapt to that as well. But I think, like I said, we're in it for a long run.
That's interesting, man. I love that, and I'm interested to see how this case goes. I do know the UCF, like I think their collective was called the Kingdom. I did see that come out last week or whatever that was recently that you were just mentioning, because I found that to be interesting. I don't know how that would work. I don't know. I don't know if like the leaders, like the directors of those collectives, are you guys still running it if that's the case, or do they just absorb it and then the athletic directors take control of it and you no longer have a say in it? Do you know how that would work?
I really don't. I mean, Colorado State's an interesting example in that the person that the guy that started the Green and Gold Guard is now the athletic director at Colorado State University. So,
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. So John Weber started the Green and Gold Guard and then became the athletic director last year. So I think obviously he has a sort of a vested interest. I mean, I'd say that in terms of his heart and his head are probably still heavily invested in the Green and Gold Guard and its success. I mean, you can't go anywhere on campus or go to any basketball game or go anywhere or see any emails where the Green and Gold Guard isn't being supported by the university, and it as well it should be. And but as far as that goes, I think that the universities, until the House case is fully resolved, the universities are somewhat are fairly tied down in terms of their abilities to work directly with those collectives. But I think really at the end of the day, it just makes sense. And understanding the dynamics involved with our particular situation, I think it's really clear that the Green and Gold Guard will eventually be absorbed into Colorado State University. I think they even came out today with a new job posting at CSU through Open Doors, of all things, for an NIL director. So I think that may be the first of its kind today. So I definitely think that things are lining up for the university to kind of take over. It's all tied into their path to the Pac-12, and these are the things that Scott Sidwell, who's the associate athletic director, he shared all these things with me. So again, from our perspective, we're just looking to come alongside and do a little bit of our part to help them get there.
So interesting, man. We talked about how it shifted over time, from here's the stuff under the table to the Johnny Manziel days to just like 3 years ago till now. I mean, it's still shifting around. I'm sure it will continue to do so. One question I did have too for you, Todd, is like, at Boise State, I know there's the Blue Collar Club, which is different than their, I think it's called the Horseshoe is the collective. And then there's the Alumni Association, obviously, that, goes into the athletic departments if you're, donating funds there. But the Blue Collar Club had come out because they were trying to, donate towards the athletes that were a part of like the non-revenue generating sports. They wanted to make sure it was specifically geared towards that. And at Boise State and in most universities, that's any sport outside of football. There are some where basketball will be a revenue generator for you, but very few. And so I'm curious for like at Colorado State, what you're doing with the Ram Collect, like how do you guys go about making sure, or is it like almost an impossible task to make sure that the non-revenue generating sports, like the women's basketball, the men's basketball at times, the baseball team, the wrestling team, gymnastics, that those athletes are also getting their cut? Or is it one of those things where those athletes are kind of on their own to make their own brand deals?
I think that we want to recognize, the Rambo Collective want to recognize the value that all the athletes at Colorado State bring. regardless if they're in a revenue sport or a non-revenue sport. Certainly the things that we talked about in terms of mentoring and, even just connecting with them and saying, hey, I'm in the financial field, or somebody wants to be, a doctor, they want to be a lawyer, they want to go into business or become a marketing person or director of marketing like yourself. How do we get there? How do you get there? Going to school and getting a degree is one thing, but then what are the real world components of getting into that type of field, and the networking that we have to offer, I think, spans across all sports, and creates that opportunity. So in terms of the NIL stuff, there's going to be a challenge there for sure. And one of the other things that you're touching on with the different pieces, and I think that's one of the concerns that a lot of universities, a lot of collectives face right now, is this concept of donor fatigue, right? Everybody's being asked. I mentioned that earlier. Everybody's, you can't go to a basketball game at CSU without, getting a commercial about donating. So, and then, schools like Tennessee are putting in, performance fees into their season tickets or whatever. It's crazy, but that's just the reality that we deal in. So we have to balance those two things. And that's the reason I bring up the donor fatigue part of it as well. We have to be able to balance that with being able to be there. And so I guess what I'm coming to is, there's non-monetary benefits to partnering, or for athletes at CSU to be, to be engaged with the RAM Collective, to say, hey, I want to be, part of this as well from the athlete's perspective. And we have had, I've got a great relationship with, a few of the women's basketball players, Hannah Cemental, Jaden Fife, Emma Ronzek, who's up for mid-major player of the year, and it's just about, investing in them, investing time in them, investing in what they care about, trying to find alignment with what their values are. And again, not necessarily, trying to get anybody rich during the process, but say, hey, look, you guys are, just as important to the success and the long-term success that Colorado State University is as a starting quarterback is.
I love that, man. That's super awesome. Todd, if somebody's interested, they're a former athlete or not, and they're just interested in the RAM Collective period, like they just want to, they might want to be part of it. Like, is it a membership base? Is it just you donate as you go? Like how do you become part of the RAM Collective, and what are the benefits? Like, I mean, if you're a member or you're in the collective, what if you're not a mentor though? Like, what if you're not necessarily like an expert in any of that type of stuff? Like, what are the benefits of being part of it?
I think the biggest benefit of it is just being in community. I think, a lot of us have stayed connected within the couple years that we played together, the guys we played with in those couple years, but there's a lot of disconnect still that could be fulfilled just by becoming part of the network. And those are some of the tools and things that we'll be rolling out in the future. We're still new to this, so engaging now, the easiest way to do it is to go to the RAM Collective. We do have a ramcollective.com. We do have a membership page, which is designed for former athletes. It's like $99 a year, and there's some content that they get, a shirt kind of like this one that is kind of exclusive to former players. And that's kind of the engagement model now. We touched on this before, how does somebody that's not an athlete or a former athlete get involved? And we will be rolling out some additional things here in the near future that will more directly look to engage the fans more directly, or I should say fans, anybody that's a non-player. Some of the ideas I had on that at the beginning didn't really get off the ground, but I'm excited about some of the things and partnerships that we'll be announcing here in a few weeks, which will be able to expand the footprint and the reach of the RAM Collective beyond just former players. But I just want to be clear that at the end of the day, that's really our secret sauce, is to have this strength in former players and building out this network. But it's going to be a process.
Sure. But one of the things you just mentioned there that was like a big piece for me is community and networking. I want the athletes that are listening to this to understand like how important it is. I coach basketball, and what I tell the athletes in high school, even there, like, have respect for your teammates and your coaches and make relationships with all of them, because the network you build through athletics will extend far past that. Like I always tell them, Todd, like, coaches, I mean, I'm not like for myself, like if an athlete's interested in marketing, I'm like, guys, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I do have a lot of experience in leadership and marketing in the corporate sector. So I can help you with that. I can connect you with if you ever needed an internship. If you're a good athlete and I see your work ethic, I might be interested in looking at your resume and potentially having you come on board. Or I know people who know people. And I think in sports, I talked to one of my friends who played at University of Idaho. And one of the things he told me, Todd, was like, one of the biggest benefits of going to school on a full ride scholarship, playing football was great. He got a good education, but it was the network that he built through athletics, because all of his former teammates and then coaches and so forth, that has expanded immensely. And it actually helped him when he was landing one of his biggest jobs after college was his network that he built through athletics. And so the whole community factor that you mentioned, I just want people to understand how important it is. I don't think they see it all the time in the moment, but your network of professionals and leaders is so big, and I think we take it for granted sometimes as athletes. And so the fact that you guys have that and you're providing that not only for the athletes that you're serving, but the people that are coming into your collective too, that are part of it. It's like a brotherhood or a sisterhood, whatever, just a network of awesome former athletes and everyone coming together for a common purpose. But the athletes that you're serving as well are just like, they needed to understand the importance of that. They need to take advantage of that. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I kind of alluded, there's a bunch of little circles out there, and I think there's going to be some power to bringing all these little circles together into a greater circle and uniting them in that common theme and that common good and that common direction and vision for not only success for current and future CSU athletes, but just in terms of building out that network and that community of former players as well. And like I said, we had it in the past. It kind of waned over the years, and it is what it is. I think there's a great opportunity though to build that though.
Man, this has been such a cool interview for me, Todd. I think it's so cool to hearing your insight. One of the last questions I have for you is something that, as a former player, and now you're in it, like involved in this specific field. What would you say is the biggest life lesson that college athletics specifically has taught you?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I came out of an era, we didn't win a lot of games. I think we won one game my senior year. So, there was, but on the other side of things, I think it was just the challenges, the work ethic. I mean, a lot of it does sound cliche, but in terms of just being able to work hard, to put in the work, to put in the practice, to build the habits and build the winning habits that you do when no one else is looking. I think all of those things I learned in college athletics. I think certainly the perseverance and the camaraderie, and certainly and quite honestly, the education. I mean, the education I got at Colorado State University, as I mentioned earlier, I thought was a fair trade for putting in the work as a football player. I mean, the value that degree brought to me in my life, far surpassed anything that I could do athletically. And I'm not sure. I wonder sometimes if that doesn't get lost in all of this NIL stuff. But I did hear that. What's that guy's name at CU? That's our rival, but. The Heisman candidate, whoever.
Oh, you're talking about Travis Hunter?
Whatever that guy is. I don't know. But,
yeah, who's that?
Yeah, I read today his GPA came out, and I thought, well, this ought to be interesting. And I went and looked, and they said, hey, he's a 4.0 student as well. So, good for him. So I think it's just really those fundamental things, especially to younger players, to kids that are playing in high school now, and learning these lessons from coaches like yourself. I think just that it does sound cliche, but the value of hard work and perseverance, and learning how to pick yourself up and come back and prepare to try to win the next day, even if you lost the day before. So,
man, I love that. I hope everyone who's listening takes note of that. I hope the athletes here that come across this podcast, or whether you're an athlete or you're a parent, or maybe you're a coach who listens to the show, rewind that and listen to what Todd just said about that. There are so many benefits to playing collegiate athletics in general, but the collegiate world, there's so much. And I love that you touch base on the education side of things too. I think a lot of times we focus a lot now, we're talking NIL, we're talking money and just future stuff, but there's an education side there. And there's something to be said about an education, just the learning how to learn. That's a whole nother concept in and of itself that I think people take for granted sometimes. So I loved all of that, Todd, and I appreciate you joining the show, man. I hope those who are listening enjoyed this and were able to take something from it. And if you guys did, I just ask you guys to share this with a friend or family member. But yeah, Todd, I appreciate your time, man, and being willing to share this with us. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, Shane, again, really thank you for this time. It's been a great discussion, and anybody that wants to check us out or learn more about us or be involved, feel free to reach out on the website. We're on X, is on the Ram Collective, as well as LinkedIn and Instagram now too. So I'm figuring some of this stuff out, but I really appreciate the time, Shane. It was a great discussion. I look forward to more discussions in the future.
Absolutely, man. I'll make sure to link all of those in the description of the podcast. So if you guys are interested in checking out the Ram Collective, they'll have the website and the social media links here in the description. And for all those who are listening, make sure to subscribe to the show, because we'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.